Parsha of Newness Torah begins chapter Yud Tes, Pasuk Aleph. Chodesh Hashlishi l'seis b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim b'yom hazeh bo midbar Sinai. The third month after Klal Yisrael went out of Mitzrayim, about 6 weeks after, and the third month it was, bo midbar Sinai. So Rashi says, b'yom hazeh, Rashi says, b'rosh chodesh, it was Rosh Chodesh. Then it says, Lo hoya tzorech lichtoiv ela bayom hahu. Every drash, I've said many times, is closer to the pshat, answers a question in the pshat more than the pshat does. So the question that is in the pshat is, you should say bayom hahu. Mahu bayom hazeh. Why do you say on this day? So Rashi says, shiur divrei Torah chadoshim. Alecha kil hayom nitnu. The Torah should be chadoshim to you as if they were given today. So therefore it should be chadoshim. There's a few questions here. One question is, if they either are or they're not chadoshim. How can you say to a person that the Torah should be chadoshim? You command them to be chadoshim. Either you see it as chadoshim or you don't see it. How can you make it chadoshim? Another question, the other question is that why is this the place where we're told that the Torah should be chadoshim? This seems to be before we even talk about Divrei Torah, before the Torah even tells us about Divrei Torah. The Torah tells us the Bo Midbar Sinai, Tachona for Torah. But why is here the place for such a drasha? And what does it mean Chadoshim? So one point we can say about Chadoshim is that there's a special koyach in Torah that it's always molei chidush. Remember many years ago, I lived in Borough Park, and I would daven the chaptam mol, I davened in the Aguda, and I saw ben gavra legavra by Kriyas Torah fellows who were professionals. The two people I happened to see were both of them lawyers, and between Gavra and Gavra, they were talking about pshat in the Maisa of Yosef, which was being read. And I thought to myself, how interesting that these fellows learned the Maisa of Yosef, and the brothers, they learned it from the childhood in yeshiva. They've heard Kriyas Torah so many times. Here they are, 40-year-olds. And they're still seeing, and they're just thinking Chedushim and Pshat in it. There's nothing equal to that in the whole intellectual world. It is possible to find Chiddush. It's Chadoshim Beinecha. I remember a certain occasion bumping to, had a meeting with Rabbi Shmuel Birnbaum. I was at a meeting with Rabbi Shmuel Birnbaum, with some others. Came in early to the meeting, and he was there alone, and he said to me, what are you learning? I said, Kedushin. He said, what is the Kedushin? Say, Kenyus or Chalisishus? So I laughed, because, it's like one of the first questions that you ask when you learn the Masechta. And Reb Shmuel Birnbaum at that time was not a youngster, and he was still asking the same question. Obviously the same question has a certain kind of freshness to it. Divrei Torah has an unbelievable koyach of freshness. That's one thing. And also, it's molei chedushim. I taught Rus this year. I saw it again with new eyes, with new questions, with new terutzim. Some you find in Svarim, and some you find inside yourself. Beinecha, in your eyes, in your own. Molei chidush. Of course, in order to see chidush in Torah, you have to know that there is chidush there. I heard from my Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Zal, Zatzal, and I think I've told you a number of times, the Rabbi said that when you come across a Shvara Chazal, strange, it's hard to accept it intellectually. He said, if you first think to yourself that everything that says in Chazal is emes, you'll be able to understand it. You'll find a way of understanding it. That hachana of knowing that everything that says in Chazal is emes, that hachana opens up the Chazal that you begin to understand it in such a way that you'll see it's emes. In the same way, if you approach the Torah and you say to yourself, it's the old stuff, you're not going to get anything out of it. If you're going to say to yourself, it's molei chidush, then you're going to see chidushim. Mavadik chidushim. It's going to be new. Either chidushim mamish, that you have chidushim the kind that you write down and you print, or chidushim, a freshness to it. We're going to read Sedra Bamidbar, numbers and numbers. There's all kinds of chidushim in the numbers. But beside that, the whole idea of counting it, what was it about? And why is it recorded like that? This is the kind of question you don't ask till years later. There's a certain freshness to that question, because it requires an answer that you didn't realize it required. What is the Torah telling us with these numbers? Why was this Hayom Hazeh, by Yom Hazeh, why is this written way back on the first day of their coming to Har Sinai, before it talks anything about Torah at all? Because it's talking about the Gisha to Torah. This is the place where it talks about the Gisha before you get to the Torah. The approach to Torah. The attitude toward Torah. The attitude is that it's molei chidush. We say the Torah are masukim and the gishmak. What is masukim and gishmak? Masukim and gishmak is the stimulation to your brain that comes from chidush. And the hispilus that you have, that look in this old chachma, and only in this chachma, it has such chidush that it tantalizes my mind. Or that it has a freshness despite the fact that I've learned it so many times. It's fresh. I'm not going to be able to learn through all the treasures that there are in this chapter. But I do want to shtel zich on a couple of things a little bit further down. So it says that in Pasuk Tes, V'yom Adonai el Moshe, Hinei anochi bo elecha ba'av he'onon, b'avur yishma ha'om b'daber imoch, v'gam b'cho yaminu la'olam, v'yagid Moshe es divrei ha'om el Adonai. The Rebbe Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu, I'm going to come to you ba'av he'onon, in a thick cloud, so that the people should hear, but I'm coming to you so that the people should hear that I'm speaking to you. And they're not going to hear the words itself or be able to figure out the words, because then I'd be speaking to them. But they will hear, But they'll hear that I'm talking to you. They'll hear that there are words, but they won't be able to comprehend the words for some reason. And they're going to believe in you forever. We find a Lashon in the Gemara that if Yechiel ben Nun had said it, I wouldn't accept it. But it doesn't say if Moshe Rabbeinu said it, because Moshe Rabbeinu is Torah itself. So, first of all, the Baruch Shem comes, Hashem Omar, Lishkoim Ba'arofel. The Baruch Shem comes, the Baruch Shem lives Ba'arofel, in a darkness. The Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Mishkan, was absolutely dark. Pitch dark. That tells us that we can't really understand how much we want to see. We can't really see. How much a person wants to see, it's hidden. You have to know it's hidden. There's only a certain amount that Baruch Shem reveals to us. And when he comes to speak to Moshe, and the plan originally was, it seems, that the plan originally was, Baruch Shem said, I'm going to come to you, you'll probably on the mountain, I imagine, doesn't say that. I'll come to you, ba'av ha'onon, there'll be a thick cloud. I'm going to come to you. The Shekhinah came to him, like the Shekhinah comes in different places, came to the Sneh. I'm going to come to you, ba'av ha'onon, in a thick cloud. There's going to be a thick cloud coming down. And they're going to hear me speaking to you. And they're going to believe in you forever. Because once they hear me speaking, so they and their children, and thousands of years later, in Far Rockaway, New York, they're going to believe it. Thousands of years later, they're going to believe it in Far Rockaway, New York. Almost 4,000 years later, that you received the Torah. But the pasuk ends by saying that Vayagid Moshe es divrei ha'om el Hashem. Moshe told the words of the people to Hashem. So what does that mean? So here Rashi says it's divrei ha'om. Tshuva al dover zeh shemati mihem. I had a tshuva, I heard an answer that relates to this from them. You're going to come and tell me from an Av Ha'onon, they're going to see that you can't see him, that you're a mystery, that you're hidden, but at the same time you speak, and they're going to hear you speak to me, and they won't understand, you're not going to be speaking to them that they can overhear, but they're going to hear that you're speaking. But I have a tshuva, al zeh, al dovar zeh. I have an answer, a response to this, Shumati Mehem, that I heard from them. What was it I heard? Shortzainam l'shmoa mimecha. They want to hear it from you. Ein adoima hashemeir mipi shaliach l'shemeir mipi hamelech. You can't compare listening, hearing something from the mouth of a shliach to hearing from the mouth of the king. And that's very, very interesting. And then Rashi continues, he says, "Ritzoneinu lirais es malkeinu." We wish to see our king. So what happens because of this? So because of this, it says, "Vayomar Hashem el Moshe, im kein shemazkikin ledaber imom." If so, that they require me to speak with them, lechel ha'om, go to them, v'kidash them, prepare them, and Yom HaShlishi for the 3 days, V'shisha b'chodesh, and then I will, because I'm going to be Niskala to them, so they have to prepare themselves. They have to go to mikveh, I'll take Sholei Isha, and make 3 days of hachonas, which were not necessary originally. And it'll come out that on Vav Sivan, they're going to hear me speak to them. Tercha'esh, Korlei Sabrokim. Now, why was it that they didn't want to hear from Moshe? Or they said, we have a tshuva on this, we don't want to hear from you. We want to hear from the Melech. What is it why a person wants to hear from a melech? So I remember when I was younger, I had the phone number of Rav Moshe Feinstein. The Rebbetzin gave it to me. If I have shilos, I should call directly to him. Oregon 7-1222. I still remembered Rabbi Perr. I don't think it works anymore. He's not here. And I used to call him. As Rav Moshe got older, so the Rebbetzin said to me, she'd pick up the phone and she would say, call Reb David. Call Reb David. She wanted to save her husband the tircha of answering the questions. So we would say, call Reb David. Now, I didn't want to call Reb David. I wanted to speak to Reb Moshe. I think everybody understands that. I've spoken to Reb David many, many times since Reb Moshe's gone. An interesting thing happened a couple of days ago in Lamed Beis Ba'omer. I had a shaila in halacha, and I called Reb David. Reb David's already not a youngster, and he has a secretary. His name is Rav Ginsburg. So you ask Rav Ginsburg, and he goes, and he asks Reb David, he comes back, he calls you back, he comes back to the phone. It's not the same as asking Reb David, but at least it happens right away. What happened on Lamed Beis Ba'omer is Rav Ginsburg said, I know the answer to that. I've been asked this 40 times already. Here the answer is kach v'kach v'kach. I was very stressed from that. I didn't hear it from Reb David. Not only that, but he didn't go to ask Reb David immediately and come back and say, well, this and this. He said, I heard it 50 times. I know the answer. He said 40 times. Nevertheless, I was makabel because I know he's reliable. And for the same reason, and I'm a little older, and I realize you can't get a hold of Reb David Feinstein so easy anymore. So I heard what he had to say, and I listened to his answer. People ask me if I heard a certain thing from Reb Shlomo Zalman. Actually, from the sound of his mouth to my ears, it didn't actually come. But I was standing there when somebody asked him the question for me, and I was standing a little bit, derech eretz back a little bit. So I say, I heard it from him. It's not really that I heard it exactly. The sound waves didn't come from his mouth to my ear. But it was mamish on the spot. I said, ask him. He asked him, mamish, I saw him ask him, I heard him ask him, and he answered him something. I didn't pick up exactly the sound waves. But I say, I heard it from him. I did really, but not really. What is it unique about the need to hear from the person? Why do you want to hear from Reb Moshe if he's alive instead of Reb David soll sein gesund und leben lang? Or you want to hear from Reb David instead of from Rav Ginsburg? What is it? Beside the words, there's a kesher. There's a kesher that's made. And Klal Yisrael wanted, when it says, Ein adoim mipi melech mipi ashir mipi melech, Klal Yisrael did not just want to know Tzivoy Hashem. Even though they said, Nasa v'nishma, whatever he says we'll do, and even though Kol HaTorah Kula, except for the Aseres HaDibros, was Ayadei Shliach. And we keep it Baruch Hashem. But that wasn't the issue. And because of this small issue, which is really so gigantic, for that we have the whole Maimed Har Sinai. Because it wouldn't have been such a Maimed Har Sinai. I don't know what it would have been otherwise. But had it been the way the Rebbeinu Shalom has said to Moshe it's going to be, it should be, so then it would have been, the Rebbeinu Shalom will talk to Moshe, and they will see Moshe, they will hear Moshe, and they'll hear something taking place, their conversations taking place. That would be the extent of it. But the Maimed Har Sinai would not have occurred, as we understand it. And what is it that made that Maimed Har Sinai? It was the bikush of going beyond the words. Not just beyond the shliach. The shliach is a chatzitza to the mishalach, even though the words are exactly the same. And for all intents and purposes, it would have worked the same way. For every purpose, it would have worked the same way. But it would not contain that special oil that comes when you hear from Rabbi Moshe Feinstein himself. When you hear from Shlomo Zalman himself. When you hear from Rabbi David Feinstein himself. There's a certain kind of an oil and a kesher. And the words are the same, exactly the same. Trustworthy people are giving it over, are conveying it. But there is something in the words heard from the person that are unique and special and choshuv, that are not that you hear from a shliach. And the same thing is hearing from the Bnei Shalom. And then they said more than that. We want to see him. We want to connect to him. We want to see him. Words contain much more than the words. And Torah B'etzim contains this. Because if we say that the words of Torah, in the Kabbalah of the Torah, were from the Piyah Kodesh Baruch Hu himself, because they wanted this special connection, this special oyer, that no other way of describing it. There's a hidden oyer to come out from the words. So then words of Torah which have chidushim in them all the time are really an extension of this. The Divrei Torah have much more meaning to them than just the words. And they're full of davar chodosh. Is an extension of the fact that that Klal Yisrael reached to hear more than words in the words. They reached to hear the Bnei Shalom's voice in the words. An extension of that is that Torah forever will remain with that koyach. That it contains much more than the words. More than what I have read before you is written here, the Kohen Gadol said. There's much more than the words in the words. I heard once from a Friar Yid. He said, he knows nothing. But he said, when I look at a Sefer Torah, and I realize the power those words have had over generations, the power of them, the power. Think to yourself, what is Am Yisrael? Am Yisrael is unique. It's immortal. And what is its immortality from? From being the bearers of Torah. The power of those words spoken, written thousands of years ago, it still shakes us and moves us and makes us. I don't know if I've been able to express the chiddush and the spilus that I feel in these words that I'm speaking to you. I don't know if I've been able to ignite in you the feeling that I have about it. The aura that I see in these words. There's a very interesting chazal. Rashi brings it. Yom HaShishi Vaychul HaShemayim V'Aretz V'Chol Tzva'am. Was Yom HaShishi. In the Bria it says Yom Echad, Yom Sheni, Yom Revi, without a Hey Hayadiyah. It comes to Erev Shabbos, it comes to Yom HaShishi, it says Yom not Shishi, but Yom HaShishi, the sixth day. So Rashi, Kluyim v'oimdim, Kulam tzluyim v'oimdim, everything that was created was waiting at Yom HaShishi. They waited, the whole world waited for Yom HaShishi. They depended on Yom HaShishi. Hushishi B'Sivan, which is the 6th day of Sivan. Shekiblu Yisrael HaTorah. Nischazu Kol HaYisiros. Kol Yisiros Bereshis. Nechsher Ki'ilu Nivra HaOlam Atah. Zeh Yom HaShishi B'Hei. It's different assurance of the same Chazal. Tonight, here's HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ma'aseh Bereshis. Basically the same thing. So the Bria is waiting, the Bria is waiting and depends for its existence on the Kabbalah Satira. But the kasha is that wasn't the day that was supposed to be Kabbalah Satira. It was supposed to be 3 days earlier. It was only 3 days later because they said with Sonenu, Lirais Malkeinu. You see that the essence of Torah, which is Mekayim the Welt, because of Torah that the world is created and is Mekayim the world, that essence of Torah depends on Yidden being Makabel the Torah with this, having this Gvalge Bikush in Torah. That Torah should contain Ritzonenu Lirais Malkeinu. The Torah should be words that are beyond words. There should be an aura in the Torah. It's only if there's a bikush from the people to want the Torah, and is there bikush to see this in the Torah, that's when the world stands on it. And this it says in the davening, V'ho'er einenu b'sarasecha. V'ho'er einenu. Hashem yoyer einai. When a child grows up, a little girl grows up, we say shetichya, she should live. And a little boy, we write nera yoyer. His candle should give light, because he is mitzuvah Talmud Torah. And when he takes inside himself this Talmud Torah, which are words that have light coming out of them, it becomes part of him, and light comes out of him. A good Yontif.